Good day, Tibor Spitz. How are you?
I am wonderful as usual.
Good. Yes, it sounds exactly like how I always experience you, which is wonderful and upbeat. And I am so thrilled that you are here. Tibor is an artist, motivational speaker, and retired scientist. He's a dear family friend, and he is a Holocaust survivor. He was born in 1929 in Slovakia, which at the time was part of Czechoslovakia. So if you're doing the math, Tibor is 96 years young. His core family growing up was an older brother, younger sister. His mother was a teacher, and his father, who was a Jewish cantor. He was 10 years old when his family learned that Jews were being expelled from public schools, no longer welcome, which began a 5-year period where he no longer had access to formal education. This was all in the time of World War II. His family's property was gradually and fully confiscated by the Nazis. He was 12 when mass deportations to the Auschwitz death camp began, and this also began a period of 3 years with his family in hiding, during which every moment literally could have been his last. During this time, Tibor and his family spent 200 days and nights hiding underground in the forest in a small shelter or a hole, essentially, while Nazi troops searched for Jews. He was eventually freed in 1945 at the end of the war. Despite the gap in his schooling, he became a chemical engineer and scientist for 44 years with a PhD in ceramic engineering. 30 years of that he spent as a scientist, researcher, and technologist in the glass industry, 14 years developing essential hardware for emerging digital technology. He's spent 28 years since as a full-time artist, professional painter, sculptor, motivational speaker, published author, and lecturer. He lives in Kingston with his beloved wife, Noemi, which, if I'm correct, you are almost at the 60-year mark. Is that accurate, Tibor?
Correct, 58.
It's amazing. I know you have no ego and therefore cannot be flattered. However, it's my podcast. So I am going to say that the main word I think of when I describe you and feel you in my heart is remarkable. The resilience for what you overcame during the Holocaust, your tremendous accomplishments in your career and your artwork. You have an expansive mind with tremendous interest and curiosity about people and nature and the world. You're extremely kind. We're just getting to know each other, and very quickly you wrote to me on email and you said, if you found time to be in a schmoozing mood on any subject, please do not hesitate to call, send a message, or email, which is just so lovely. I just felt the warmth and the openness of that. And mostly, you're inspiring for choosing to live a life of love despite surviving unimaginable hardship. We will talk more about all of this in the episode, but I just cannot thank you enough for being here today.
And vice versa. I'm happy to share some memories with you.
I am so appreciative of that. In layman's terms, for those of us who don't have a PhD in ceramic engineering, tell us more about the work you did in the glass industry.
I started working in a research institute in Czechoslovakia. I had a lot of patents, inventions, because all my work was experimenting new glasses, new chemistry, speeding up glass. This was the only field where you could become really a technologist, know how to make it, and also scientifically explain how is it made. Scientists stayed away with extremely hot environment, which would melt even bricks. It's extremely dangerous. And after the war, I needed the adrenaline. I accepted that very dangerous profession. I became both scientist as well as technologist. And it was very practical because wherever I went, they needed either a scientist or a technologist or both.
What were the uses of the glass primarily?
All glass products on the market or in science, let's say from tableware to bottles, a flat glass, which was a top of knowledge because it was very difficult to make flat glass. Mechanically used to be a very difficult process, and I became a specialist in that very demanding field because there were 1,000 ways how to do it wrong and only few ways how to do it right. And when we escaped from a communist country, the following 15 years we moved 8 times, practically every 2 years in Canada and America. because I was in such a demand.
And now, if you could tell us about something that interests you, maybe a hobby, something that you do that really lights you up, gives you a lot of joy.
You mentioned that I didn't go to school for 5 years. In those 5 years, children or students learn how to think in sentences. When you say horse, you spell HO and so on. I missed that transition in my brain and I was thinking in images. It really completely changed my perception of the world, my curiosity of practically anything which appears as an image. It enriched my life rather than limited it. Whatever I was doing in science, even abstract things, I was really drawing pictures and I was turning it into something useful, something visual. This was some kind of a entrance to art or some kind of a connection. When a reporter from New York came to visit and write an article, she eventually came with a very interesting thing. She put my picture of my face, split it in half, put it in the left and right side, and said, this guy is a complete anomaly because his left brain and right brain cooperate so fully that it is not an intellectual or abstract part or image part or scientific part. They divide science from art and it's a conflict in it. I didn't have that. I have seen things mostly as they were rather than interpreting. My mind did not compare anything to anything because I had very little education. I was able to do science by using art. This was some kind of a thing which came out of the Second World War or Holocaust, where I was not allowed to become intellectual in an age which has been very sensitive to development of thinking and imagining.
It was almost like you're able to think through your heart or feel through your
Yes,
brain.
yeah.
Yes.
And it was really a no big difference between emotions and knowledge and curiosity. It all fused together. And my life was extremely interesting because a chemist look at a piece of metal and see iron and chemical composition. An artist see beautiful arches and beautiful contrast and sunset behind the bridge and so on. Imagine that when I looked at anything, I saw all of those things together, and with my will and choice, I had to distinguish and separate those things. Let's look at it as a chemist, let's look at it as an artist, like as a scientist or as an astronomer or some mystical part of it, seeing invisible things which are everywhere.
It's like a multi-dimensional view that most people don't have access to, I would say.
Most people with that kind of mind end up in a mental hospital because it's a confusion. I knew several of them. They came to ask for help, and I did help them because it's very confusing. And it originated in, you mentioned that hole in a forest where I spent really 200 days and nights at the end of the war because it was, they tried to kill all the Jews with ruthless efficiency. In those 200 days and nights, I started having some visions and suddenly appeared a voice instructing me, telling me all kinds of things and instructing me how to survive that impossible situation. That voice was teaching me how to separate my thoughts without confusing them, without being confused by them.
Interesting. Where other
Yes.
people that you've known would wind up in mental institutions, the voice told
Yes.
you how to process and make use of this kind of multidimensional information.
Exactly.
What did the voice tell you about how to actually process things in a way that was useful and powerful?
That voice was some kind of a self-preservation. I don't know if it was from outside or if it came from inside. But first was to control emotions, then to remove any ego, to tell me something like Carl Sagan found out when he sent that probe into Voyager, into the universe, and he called his planet Little Blue Dot. They showed me that I am living in a little blue dot. I'm almost nothing on that little dot. No ego. The whole world was created for me. I didn't like some people. I would call it even that I hated them as a boy because they offended me or something like that. I got rid of all negative emotions, all hatred, simply telling me that those people were hateful because somebody hurt them. They were not really bad people. They were hurt people who retaliated or punished somebody else to feel better without self-control and without knowing what they were doing. I started feeling sorry for people who were murderers and who were really criminals and gangsters because somehow in my mind I saw their childhood and parents and environments and they were practically innocent. I lost complete negative thoughts about anything or about anybody.
It's just so remarkable. We're going to learn more about the story in a minute, but it's amazing that given what you went through, that you were able to access empathy somehow. And I think I heard you talk about almost seeing the inner essence of these people that got distorted by their life circumstances and their own hardships. And somehow you saw through to their essence and were able to not feel hatred. That's beyond remarkable to me.
I did not become ill by hatred or by disappointment or by desperation. I give you an example. I was 10 years old. I was the smallest in the class of about 50 or to 60 students. And we had a physical exercise in the gym. And as the tallest boy was the first one, I was the last one in a row. And then the girls were next to us and the tallest girl standing next to me. I befriended the tallest girl. She was a daughter of a guy who sent Jews to the gas chambers. After the war, she came back, already 15 as I was, but she looked beaten up. Who knows what kind of a refugee situation. And I came out of the forest. We both wanted to continue because she lost about half a year through the war. I lost 5 years. We were again in the same class, and she asked me for help. I knew more than she did for some reason. I knew the answer, and I was helping her. And she was a daughter of a guy who was a fascist Nazi, and I didn't feel any hatred toward her. The contrary, I felt sorry for her. This was a result of solving those emotional relationships. I was stronger than anybody around me. As they felt it, I considered this totally normal. But it was remarkable as I looked at it through your eyes.
Yes, it is remarkable. I know that somehow with the way your brain and heart work together, it was normal and it's really beautiful. So we have this period around age 10 is when you and your family and the Jewish community started losing rights and property. Your family received a letter from the school saying that Jewish kids can no longer cross the threshold, which was effectively when this period of you not having access to a formal education began. There were hundreds of laws that were passed, which resulted in you and your family gradually losing all of your property. And then I believe in 1942, the next level kicked in, which was we don't want the Jewish people to live among us. And families were beginning to be sent to settlements. Is that accurate?
There were 270 laws passed defining who was a Jew and what to do, what we were allowed, like curfew and no jobs, no professions, eventually no employment. They let us starve and use scavenging, whatever. Those 2 years were designed by psychologists who produced gradual misery so that people would say, we can live without books, we can live without violin, can live without furniture, we can live without more than one set of clothes. And this gradually robbed us of not only money and property and jewelry and so on, but also daily necessities. I was working in probably 2 dozens of different professions, which were enriching my experiences, but it was no education in it except observation and physical survival, because when I worked for a farmer or a gardener, whatever he couldn't sell, which was like carrots or things like that, I was paid by that. It gave us some income. And illegally, I was fishing at night. When that misery really stopped, when it looked like we couldn't experience anything worse, and they told us, you know what, we have factories, labor camps, and we take you there. You have to learn all kinds of things which you would need. You take your tools with you. And in 1942, those transports, we call it transports or deportations, started in cattle cars. Again, very sophisticated. First of all, they sent 16 years old girls who were not married, then the boys, military age after them, and then people middle age, and then the whole family and old people. And nobody knew what was going on. Each of us were ready to go back. Luckily, we lived in northern Slovakia, and a few miles across the border was an infamous camp Auschwitz. And somebody escaped from there. I went fishing at middle of the night in ice cold water. It was melted ice from the mountains. And with my hands, I was catching trouts. And suddenly I heard some voice. That voice was in Polish, Yiddish, some kind of a mixture. Boy, come here. And I talked to them through the bars. They offered gold. I gave me a gold coin, and they told me, if you get us out of here, we give you a fistful of those things. I came back, hid them in an apartment. We had to keep them for about 10 days until police stopped searching for them. And they told us that they escaped. They were medical doctors. They wanted to kill all the Poles, all Russians, and repopulate it with Germans. And they were telling us that those transports are coming. You walk naked into a shower chamber. 1,000 people fit in, females from one side, males from the other side, and then gas kills them and prisoners burn the bodies. And every 2 hours, 1 or 2,000 people were turned into ashes. And my mother said, all my relatives are there, my parents, my sisters, their husbands. My father said, my 7 siblings, families, they were my cousins, a lot of cousins, because he had 7 siblings. And after 3 days, we understood that they were not kidding, and I'm alive still because of that.
You got this news, which most people didn't have access to. And if I understand correctly, the deportations just continued to increase. And then you entered a period of about 3 years where you and your family were actively escaping deportation, during which time any day could have been your last day. And you escaped into the mountains and the countryside.
Yeah, very accurate. My father was in charge of officiating as a Jewish burials. President of the country was a Catholic priest, and he respected that if a Jew dies, no other priest would bury him. Lutheran would not even bury a Catholic and vice versa. This was like trying to keep life in Slovakia as normal as possible. There were rumors about killing, about this and that, but people didn't believe it because politicians, even Roosevelt, Stalin, Churchill, even Pope never confirmed it, that they would be killing Jews in the concentration camps. It was a buried 16th page or 25th page in the New York Times that there are rumors about killing of Jews. People didn't believe it. My father was told his family would be deported with the last transport after Jews were not present in Slovakia, and they would not need anybody to bury them. They told my father that he would be the last one. We tried to avoid always when we saw those cattle cars, we knew it was prepared for people, and we just vanished through the roof. Very dangerous and hidden. We were hiding few days in dilapidated buildings or forests, and simply in places where we knew that they would not come to search for us because the roof could have caved and killed them. Because of my mother's friends, we found out that they wanted to deport us, and I even have a book where Dolny Kubin, which was the name of the town, was describing a Jewish community in Slovakia, and a letter with our names on an order of militiamen ordered to deport us. And we found out we were in 1943 in limbo, without any professionals, without ability to make money, just scavenging and doing all kinds of things. I cannot even describe to you what I was doing to get food, stealing something. It was a military garrison, and a guy with a gun was walking around it because it was food for the soldiers. I was able at middle of the night to jump into the window. I was small, my head fits through the bars, and I was stealing some provisions. If the guy with a gun would have heard something or caught me, I'd be dead. My mother was really perplexed. Where did you get those beans? Where did you get that sugar? And I couldn't tell her that I risked my life.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
said to this day you can't throw out food because in your mind you do a calculation of how many days of survival each portion of food represents. Is
Oh,
that right?
it's not days. The leftover on a plate would give me maybe half an hour, 1 hour life.
So we have this period of time when you were still moving around from place to place, and some people were taking you in, and you were scavenging.
It was in 1944 already. Slovaks understood the Germans were losing the war, and they made a little uprising in the summer of 1944. Naturally, it didn't take more than 2 weeks for German army to take over Slovakia, and they came with trucks with a machine gun on the top of truck and the mortars they were shooting ahead, and they were falling, setting fire on houses and killing people, animals. In 2 weeks, they took over Slovakia completely. Gestapo came immediately after them, SS and so on. And they replaced the Slovak Nazi army. And it was in August. Few regular citizens, scared of the war, scared of the German shooting everything in front of them, ran away from their homes to villages and to mountains and to adjacent areas because Germans moved on the roads.
If you could describe the circumstances that led you into the forest, what was going on?
Yeah, we removed our yellow stars, which we had to wear, those 4-inch yellow stars, which made us outcasts and dangerous people. And we joined those civilians which were running away from the war as the Germans took over Slovakia. They were running into small villages and into the mountains and so on. And then a few weeks later, they returned home. But we stayed with them, pretending to be those refugees or those running away, while other people were preparing themselves to return home. And some were Jewish who did not believe that they can live in forests like furry animals, went back and they were deported or killed. It was huge posters. Germans issued big posters in Slovak language saying, "You survived so far, we will not harm you, you are safe," and so on.
Ugh.
But we knew better. And while we were about a few weeks, those villages where was a guy, he still had a clay floor in a little house. Half of the house was a horse, the other half he lived. He rented us, shared with us. He went to the horse and shared for some little money the room where he lived. And then another family joined us, which means there were two families and a horse and the owner.
Gosh.
Very primitive conditions, hardly surviving. And when all the people moved back into the town, to their homes, we moved to the forest and vanished. All they knew, those people, that we left in that direction.
And so this is the period where you spent over 200 days and nights in this underground shelter. Can
Yes.
you describe what the conditions were like and how you survived?
It was not a simple hole in the ground because my brother had a really imagination how to reinforce that hole with beams like fallen trees. We found fallen trees. We had only little hatchet I was wearing behind my belt. I was ready to kill anybody who tried to kill me. I was such a bandit. That's why you still see me.
Yeah. Yeah.
We didn't have any ropes. We didn't have any nails. We didn't have anything. But we found enough wood. I can show you the design.
Okay, for anyone who's listening, you'll have to check out the video on YouTube because Tibor is showing some artwork of the design. And that's your artwork?
Yeah, it's my painting.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, I understand it even better now.
These are conditions where we build it. You see the snow and forest, and underneath. That's why those armed men didn't find us.
It's amazing. And what was it
No,
like inside that shelter?
we reinforced it with beams. You have seen on the picture, and camouflaged with dirt and clay, and then needles in pine needles because it was very high in the mountains. To be there, we brought into the shelter half a bag of potatoes, half a bag of some flour, and some food. And it was September, October. So forest is full of food. We knew the mushrooms. We knew there were little strawberries. We ate that. It was acceptable. Had hope. We heard the bombs falling from the airplanes or in cannons like bank, because when you shoot it, when it explodes, and we could estimate even the distance. And unfortunately, they had to consolidate the army and bring some kind of a reinforcement and so on. It took 7 long months before they attacked again. And it happened in April following year. 7 months. First, it was rather acceptable to be in that forest. Not very convenient. We didn't have space to lie down. We were squeezed, touching each other.
You said
And
if one of you turned, everyone had to turn. Is that right?
yes, because it was not enough space. We did not believe that we would stay longer than a few weeks. And we were exhausted. It was very difficult to remove that dirt, cutting roots of a tree and build that shelter. And we were in a hurry. Week after week, day after day, hour after hour, and then minute after minute. My mother was controlling our mood and controlling our behavior, because we had our grandfather with us, my father's father with us. He was around 70, and he would not compromise. He would talk loud. My mother said somebody can walk by and betray us, hearing a human voice coming out of the ground. My mother had to really keep our safety.
Yeah.
And when we were really dying of starve to death, really, very few people can experience it. It was the last calorie. I needed the last calorie to put in my mouth to live another minute, another hour, another day.
The weather started getting colder, and
Colder and
the
colder,
food became less available.
it's available. I was mostly supplier of those food because I was strong and still very flexible and daring, I would say. I wouldn't call it brave, because this for me was nothing. Who am I? Who am I to cry over another death? I didn't take it seriously. My brother was devastated by possibility of losing his life. I was not, because maybe that voice was telling me emotions are not good for you, are not helping, and only harming you and weakening you. I learned how to suppress emotions.
You almost went into a form of hibernation. Is that how you
Yes,
describe it? Yeah.
hibernation. Now they call it meditation. And in the movies, Songs of Survivors, that PBS purchased it, more than 1 million people saw it. And it's a scene where I am painting a situation inside of the shelter, and they were asking the same question: how you felt, how you survived mentally, how you survived physically, and so on. We were really desperate. Any moment a soldier could stick his gun into the hole, into the opening, and finish us. It was a very nerve-wracking experience. And what we were doing, whispering to each other, jokes we remembered, trying to lift our spirit, trying to escape. This was totally impossible situation.
No idea how you did it, and I am so thankful for that voice that you heard. The documentary you mentioned about the Song of Survivors, there's a song in there, and we'll come back to that. I don't want to spoil it yet. But there's a line in that song that says, "I hear a voice from within reveal my choice, let go of hatred, and a way will be found." And for me, that number one is a beautiful line, but that's specifically about your experience. And thank God you heard that voice and were able to, between going into a meditative state and getting that guidance, just somehow against all of the odds, get through that and come out in a place of love and understanding. It's beyond, I'm going to say remarkable for the 20th time, but it's beyond remarkable. I know that there was an encounter with armed men and you actually fled while your family stayed behind.
We came out of the shelter at night trying to stretch a little and so on, when a group of armed men shouting, they pretended to be Nazi army. saying, give us gold, give us money, give us dollars. Slovak and Ukrainian language were not very different. My mother communicated with them. We said, we have no money. One of the soldiers was guarding us, lined us up, guarding us with his automatic weapon, and those three of them crawled into the shelter and searched for money. I told my mother, I have that hatchet. I split his head of the young guy who was guarding us and take his weapon and shoot the others through the opening. We whispered each other. My mother asked me, you know how to shoot that weapon? I said, no, I figured it out. And my mother said, you know what, leave it to me, leave it to me, I'm going to handle it. And then they came out, those people from inside said, okay, before we kill you, you can have your last wish. And my father and grandfather said, let us pray. Let us pray a few minutes. And Jews are usually buried with a tefillin on. They put that on and said, okay, don't torture us here, kill us. Go on. And my mother started shouting, why should you kill my children? What did the children, what did we do to you? And my father again, get it over with. And they started laughing and they lifted the weapons. I jumped over the stump. It was like a fallen tree and zigzag. And they started shooting at me. I've seen those branches falling into my face. And I escaped.
So then, if I'm right, you thought they were killed. You came back to find that they were alive miraculously, except they had been robbed of whatever little bit you had left, and they were in their underwear in the snow.
Yes, and returned to bury my people. I was sure that when they were shooting after me, they were shooting them and killing them. And they were standing in snow in underwear because they even took the berries and mushrooms and things like leaves. They took even the food, our backpacks, our blankets we came with, and even top clothes of male. They didn't touch my mother and my sister. And it started snowing. It was February, 2 months before we left the shelter. And when I talk to schools, I tell them a miracle happened. We disturbed the ground and we probably hit one of those little veins, this thermal water, which was in those spots, like stinking sulfur, stinking water, which was healing. And it was hydrosulfide, which is the hallucinating drug. It was warm, which it heated up this very small shelter, and it put us into some kind of a hallucinating state where we were half asleep. And this is how we survived the following 2 months. And they probably didn't shoot them because I escaped. It was an eyewitness of their crime. They tried to do it by starving us, freezing us, or letting the Germans come to do the job.
Thank goodness for that thermal stream. That's just really amazing. Yeah. So the liberation happened in 1945.
I was 15 in 1945. We were liberated in April. In May, Second World War was over, and the Soviet Union took over Czechoslovakia. Yalta between Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin was established, and Czechoslovakia, as a Slavic country, somehow made it into the Soviet sphere. The new school year started in September. Our mother, a teacher, had a lot of friends, and they started helping us to catch up in few months for 5 lost years. And it was almost 20 hours a day studying, catching up. For me, it was the year 16, 17, 18, and part of 19. We moved to another town where my father became again a Chazan cantor because when a synagogue was functioning with few dozens of Jews, because in this town where we were, only few of them returned from death camps and labor camps. And at the end of my graduation, I found out that I excelled in all subjects, all the best marks. Stalin wanted to use 600 years old knowledge of chemistry of Czechoslovakia. He ordered Czechoslovak government to get 160 high school students with the best marks to become chemists, regardless what they wanted, regardless what those their talents and so on. But usually Soviet Union, they were grooming kids since kindergarten, but he didn't have time, and he started in Czechoslovakia from high high school graduations. I wanted to become a sculptor. My brother wanted to study art, painting, but we were chosen, for mostly male students, to go to military academy and to study and to continue explosives and chemistry of war. I got ill. I went home to my parents, and for 2 months they tried to find out what was wrong with me. After 2 months, a young doctor came and he said, "You had yeast deficiency. It's a very serious illness, but very few people know about it." I came back to the university healed, and all people were already taken to military academy. Again, good luck or some kind of a divine intervention, and the school was practically empty. I was the only student, department of ceramic engineering, and fourth year, last year, was very specialized in glass. I became really a rarity in that field because scientists try to stay away from the dangerous field.
You spend a career being a pioneer, you have patents. At some point, you are called to Cuba in your work, and in the process of going back and forth to Cuba at one point, see an opportunity to escape to the West and basically seek asylum during an airplane refueling, which could be an entire episode in and of itself. You spent over 10 years in Canada fixing glass factories, at which point you and your wife at this point, because you had met Noemi, were starting over from scratch with just the clothes on your back. And you continued to have an amazing career that took you into also the emerging digital technology space, which was really the beginning moments of PCs and hard drives. It's just amazing, that part of your career. You have so much wisdom to share that many of us don't have access to because our brains don't work the way yours does, and because of the really extreme, hard to imagine circumstances that you went through. I have a segment on the podcast that I call the Thrive Takeaway. What I ask on every episode is if listeners remember only one thing from our conversation today, one thought, one piece of advice, what would you want them to carry with them so that they can thrive in their careers? I will open that up to more than one for you. What is it that you most want people to understand so that they can thrive?
I was lucky to have a 36 years old professor. His name was Wichterle. He was a genius, and he taught us a lot of things. And we complained that we have no time for any social life, we have no time, and we are tired. And he taught us this: study chemistry, and one of the lobes of your brain would become tired. Switch to mathematics, which is different lobe. Switch to economy. Switch to engineering because we had to study technology. When you get tired with one group of ways of thinking, switch to a different one which is using a different part of the brain. He taught us never get tired. When I started teaching esoteric wisdom and looked at Kabbalah, meditation, contemplation, and hypnosis and all those things, I hit this area and I promised people that they would never get tired and they can absorb as much knowledge and remember everything as they wanted to without any effort, without ever getting fatigue. That's why I don't distinguish between making art or building a new kind of glass. Scientific subjects did not make any difference to me because of this training. And I would suggest it to anybody who has more ambitions and little time and little opportunity to achieve their goals.
Yeah, and I think there's probably a role for creativity in the workplace. We can get very much into our left brain and thinking, and I've had other guests on the podcast that have talked about the fact that we don't typically think about creativity in the workplace, but that's how you access the other part of your brain and you can stay fresh. So not to get so bogged down in necessarily the processing and the thinking, but to also bring creativity to it. Yeah.
And most people, when they hit some obstacles, get frustrated. And this is a waste of time because it is not doing anything. Secondly, is fear. To be scared and fear is good. To anticipate dangers and to have intuition, feelings of danger. But to feel fear, be scared is total waste of time because it takes away your ability to immediately react. It's always a lot of art in science, a lot of science in art, a lot of imagination to rest because those lobes rest. while you are involved in a different one.
It's interesting because that very much coincides with work that I do with my clients in my coaching, which is mental fitness work. The idea is the hand on the hot stove analogy. So if you're putting your hand on a hot stove, you do want that warning signal from your brain to say hot stove or danger. But if you stay in that place, as you described, of negativity, of fear for an extended period of time beyond that, for anything more than just a few seconds for that kind of survival instinct, it's literally the definition of self-sabotage. You're actually
Yes.
continuing to press your hand on the hot stove. And in that state, you can't be happy or grateful or productive because you're completely just in the business of surviving. So can you tell me about the role of gratitude? There's a quote in researching you that I came across, and it was, as survivors of the Nazi Holocaust, we both celebrate life with every breath we take and consciously when waking up each morning. Can you talk about how having been through what you've been through has given you such a strong sense of gratitude?
We call it, we have Thanksgiving every morning, and each piece of food in my mouth, I praise the Lord, as they say. And it's not a God of religions. It is the whole universe is very intelligent. Every photon, every quark is intelligent. I learned to feel the whole pulse. It goes in pulses, frequencies, vibrations. But consciousness, human awareness of consciousness, is something even scientists and mystics are not aware of. To prove it is very difficult. And with that consciousness, you can eventually make a hole into that big intelligent machine. And it's not very kind universe if you don't insert the kindness into it. And there are things some people feel or use that are not physical. I understood. I was standing on a creek and I was looking into the water and I saw a big trout eating little minnows. They didn't look at if they were their daughter or his son. It might have been their children. And they were hungry, faster, ate slower, bigger, ate smaller, and I understood how the world operates. The stronger was killing the weaker one, even in human societies. And I was a victim of that system. More armed people could easily rob smaller group unarmed people. This is, I understood as 10 years old, that this is a rule of the universe. Later on, I understood that bigger galaxy comes closer to smaller galaxy and swallows it, absorbs it, just digests it.
What is it that made you say these are the rules of the universe? I see them on a macro level, and I could be dissuaded by that because I have no control and the big eats the small. Yet what you took away from all of this and the strength that you found was in choosing love.
This is where, if you read Mein Kampf, if you read Nazi philosophy, they used this rule just with a brutal force, killing opponents with practically no conscience. If you read Mein Kampf, it's saying Jews have put poison into humankind by bringing consciousness, ethics, and morals and justice into it, that we don't have all the same rights. The strong people in Mein Kampf, it's saying if you see your neighbor weak, take his wife. If you do that, you don't live a good life. Exhausted the richness of the universe. Kindness, love, and cooperation, it gives you a good life. A life of love and kindness gives you 90% of pleasures in life. But I never forget of a song which is saying, praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. Never forget that the world is a place where violence and brutality is ruling, and be prepared for it and never hesitate to use force against force. You cannot bring peace without being strong. Weak people don't bring peace. We become victims. Strong people can bring peace. I have combined my life philosophy, preferring kindness, but never hesitating to fight brutality or physical violence or even mental violence or blackmail. This is what is called balance of power or balance of wisdom.
You've said to me, don't cry, bring a cat. Can you talk to me about that
Yeah,
expression?
Yeah, we were in Washington, D.C. last November, and there were 500 cadets in the room, like young people. And after an hour of interview and this and that, answering questions, they asked me, "You have such an experience. Can you tell us in one sentence how we should live?" And I told them, "Don't cry over the spilled milk." And they stood up and applauded. And I said, "Bring a cat." And they stood for another 2 minutes applauding. 18 years old students of war, cadets in uniforms.
Don't cry over
Because
spilt milk, bring a
yeah,
cat. Is that relate to, I think I remember you telling me, life is short, we're specks of dust in a big universe, we have this precious time here, why spoil it?
yes, and be grateful because you could have been born as a blade of grass, as an ant in a forest, branch of a tree, and you were giving a incredible gift
Yeah.
to be human beings.
I, for one, can say that I'm thrilled that you were not born a blade of grass, because then I wouldn't be able to spend
I
this
agree.
time with you.
I'm very
And
grateful too.
I have a segment called It's My Podcast, so there will be music, which, as we're talking about, there are things we don't understand in the universe, but there's a way that music, I think, like storytelling, hits us at a very core DNA level. And I'm going to do the honors of just talking about this song that you shared that you told me you'd like to add to the list, which is All Is Changing. We Are Witness, We Are Life by Kelly McKenzie. It's a part of a PBS documentary that we've referenced in the episode
Yes.
called We Remember, Song of Survivors. And
Yes.
Tibor's story is featured in this documentary. I'm going to link in the show notes to a version of it on YouTube that will be on my website. It is lyrically, musically, one of the most beautiful and haunting and inspiring pieces of music that I've ever heard.
I can help you a little bit by saying she came here and she asked me, "What is song, melody, or music which makes you exciting, which vibrates with you?" Music is vibrations.
Yes.
Our vocal cord is vibrating, that's why we speak. Speech is also in that category. Different musical instruments, different metals. The whole universe is vibrations in different frequencies and in different dimensions. And I told her a prelude of Bach, number one, and another song which was a Jewish prayer, Hashkivenu.
You pointed to some music that you felt
Yes.
embodied the spirit, the feeling of
Yes.
what you wanted to convey, and then she built the
Yes.
song from there. It's one of my favorite performances I've ever seen. So thank you for
Yes,
sharing
yes.
it, and I'm going to make sure it's available to everyone. And as far as what you're up to in the world and where people can find out more, I said it at the beginning. Tibor is a remarkable painter, a sculptor, a ceramist, motivational speaker, published author, a lecturer, and I'm going to make sure to include in the show notes where you can find and experience him. And when I say 96 years young, I couldn't mean it any more than I mean it. Just amazing to have had this chance to spend time with you, and the extra layers of empathy, kindness, curiosity, appreciation for the world, love in the face of the most challenging circumstances I can even imagine, and emerged in this space is beyond inspirational. And when times get tough, as they often do, just to know that you're in the world and offering that kind of hope and inspiration means the world to me. And just to experience you and your kindness and to get a chance to spend time and get to know you has been, and will continue to be, one of the pleasures of my life.
You know, we are almost related. We love your parents, and you are very welcome to come to visit, to see the messy living room.
I would love to see your messy living room.
I thank you. I'm very grateful, but as I told you, I have no ego. You can tell me the nicest things. I feel nothing.
I know. I'm going to keep trying, though. You can't stop me. You can't stop me.
No, it is a very nice custom that people appreciate each other.
Yes.
But it goes like a water from a duck.
I
It
know.
doesn't go into me.
Makes me, for whatever it's worth, I know that you care about joy and happiness, and it makes me happy to be able to experience you and to be able to share you with other people. So I want to thank you so much
I
for that.
appreciate your kindness, and please come climb to the third floor. We have no elevator. And I would love to hug you.
I
And
would love that. And I want to see your artwork in person.
yes,
Thank you, Tibor. I am so grateful for you. All right, everyone, that brings this episode of Stories We Haven't Shared to a close. I believe stories are our humanity waiting to be shared, and listening makes it possible. Thanks so much for being here today by our virtual campfire. And thank you so much again to Tibor Spitz. Until next time, take care. Thank you.
I thank you. You are a very beautiful, kind person.
Oh, thank you.
I'm very grateful.